So you're ready to level up your StarCraft game, and you keep hearing about this thing called a build order. It's kind of the secret sauce to a killer start. But let's be real, when you first look at one, it can be a little intimidating. Well, today, we're going to crack that code. We're going to turn that confusing checklist into your new winning strategy.
You open up a guide, and you get hit with this, right? A wall of numbers, slashes, and weird game terms. If it looks like a foreign language to you, don't worry, you're not alone. This is StarCraft's own little shorthand, but I promise you, once you learn the basics, it is actually incredibly simple.
You know, the best way to think about a build order is to just think of it as a recipe. That's it. It's a precise set of instructions, something that's been tested and refined over thousands and thousands of games, and it's all designed to get you from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. Your goal is the finished dish, and this guide, this is your step-by-step path to get there.
Okay, so the first step is just learning to read the language of the recipe. A build order tells you what to do, sure, but way more importantly, it tells you when to do it. And it does this in two main ways, and neither of them has anything to do with a clock. First up, we have supply notation. This ties your next move directly to your supply count, that number in the top right of your screen. So when a guide says 9/10 supply depot, it literally means the instant your supply hits 9, you build that depot. Easy. The other type is called event notation. Something like at 100 gas, lair, isn't tied to your supply. It's triggered by a game event. In this case, the moment you have 100 Vespene gas in the bank. So it's all about hitting a specific milestone.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, why all this complexity? Why not just use a simple timestamp, like build a barracks at the 3-minute mark? And that's a really fair question. The answer, though, is actually pretty key to understanding high-level play.
Turns out, the in-game clock is surprisingly unreliable. For starters, not everyone plays on fastest speed. And even if they do, network lag can cause that clock to drift out of sync with what's actually happening in the game. In fact, in-game timers are often just banned in competitive play for this exact reason. Timestamps, they're just not consistent.
And this is why supply count is the gold standard. It's the one thing that never changes. It doesn't matter what your game speed is or if you're lagging, none of it matters. 8 supply is always 8 supply. It's the stable anchor that your entire strategy is built on.
All right, now we're getting to the part that trips up almost every single new player. For 2 of the 3 races in this game, the most important instruction is actually the one that's not even written down. Here it is. This is the big one, the single most important rule that messes with new players. If you're playing Terran or Protoss, your command center or your Nexus must be constantly producing workers. That building should never, ever be idle in the early game. It is your silent #1 priority.
So when a guide tells you to build a supply depot at 9 supply, and then your next instruction is a barracks at 11, what happens in between? Well, it's silently assuming that you built workers at supply 9 and 10. The guide doesn't bother to write it down because it's just the default. It's the economic engine that's powering your entire build.
Just remember this, unless you see the specific instruction to stop, your town hall should always have that little worker icon lit up and counting down. Always.
The only time you ever break this rule is for a super high-risk strategy. When a guide specifically says to cut workers, it's a very deliberate choice to sacrifice your economy to save up resources for a powerful, perfectly timed attack. But this has to be written down. If the guide doesn't say it, you don't do it.
Okay, now let's talk about Zerg. Because for Zerg players, you can basically take that whole unwritten rule and throw it right out the window. For Zerg, there are no assumptions. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Yeah, with Zerg, there are absolutely no assumptions. The guide has to spell out every single action because for Zerg, the margin for error is razor thin.
The whole reason for this comes down to one core Zerg mechanic, larva. See, unlike the other races, Zerg don't have separate buildings for workers and for army units. Everything, from a little worker drone to a giant ultralisk, comes from the same limited resource. This creates a constant, crucial trade-off. Every drone you make is one less Zergling you can build. And this is exactly why Zerg guides have to be so explicit. If a guide doesn't say, stop making drones, a player's natural instinct is to keep building their economy. But the problem is, when the enemy army shows up at your door, you'll have a great bank account, but absolutely nothing to defend with. That stop drones command is often the single most important instruction in an entire Zerg build order.
Okay, I know that was a lot to take in. So let's just boil it all down into a quick reference guide that you can use to remember the most important lessons here.
First, a quick recap on the notation. You've got supply notation, which is your trigger to act when you hit a specific supply number. And you've got event notation, your trigger for when a certain game condition is met, like having 100 gas. Just 2 simple triggers for everything you need to do.
And here it is, the big takeaway for worker production. For Terran and Protoss, always assume you should be building workers. That's the unwritten rule. But for Zerg, you assume nothing. The guide has to tell you exactly when to make workers and when to make an army.
So just remember the fundamentals. Read the notation. Follow the steps written on the page. And for you Terran and Protoss players out there, keep that town hall busy.
You now have the key to decoding basically any build order in the game. You've read the recipe, you understand the language, and you know the secret ingredients. So the only question left is, are you ready to cook?